Hi, this is Samantha, and this video is going to be on the math courses and curriculum that we offer here at DORS. So to start us off, we have 4 different math classes. As of December 2020, they are called Developmental Math, Pre-Algebra, and then Algebra 1A and Algebra 1B. I say as of December 2020 because in past school years, they've had slightly different names, but the content that each of those 4 classes covers has remained relatively the same. Each of those classes is 9 weeks or 1 quarter, so students could potentially start off the school year in August in the first of those 4 classes, the developmental math class, and potentially get through all 4 of those classes by the end of the school year in May. We are not in charge of placing students in which class they start off at. That is the assessor's job. Is they offer a test that students will take, which helps us determine where students should start. But students could start in any of those 4 classes. The developmental math class and the pre-algebra class, the curriculum we use has been created by DORS math teachers. And the reason for that is because they cover a lot. The developmental math class covers math standards around first grade through some of 6th grade, and the pre-algebra class covers math standards from 6th grade to 8th grade. So it covers a lot of different topics, and we're going through all those topics in only 9 weeks. So we have got the curriculum that we've made for those 2 classes, and then for the algebra curriculum, we're using curriculum through illustrative mathematics, which I'll talk about in a little bit. For the developmental math class, there are 4 units we go through, and I've got those 4 units here up on the screen. The 4 units are a unit on addition and subtraction, a unit on multiplication and division, a unit on fractions and decimals, and then a very short unit we could just call a pre-algebra unit. For these first 2 units that we go through, when we're talking about addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division, we are looking at how you do those operations with whole numbers. We get into integers and how you do those 4 operations with negative numbers. We do a lot of real world situations. We get into exponents, square roots, and the coordinate plane. And then fractions and decimals is what it sounds like. We talk about how you add, subtract, multiply, and divide fractions, how you add, subtract, multiply, and divide decimals. And then the last lesson in that unit goes through how you convert between them. There's also a lot of real world context for those lessons. And then the last one, the pre-algebra one, we're looking at order of operations, which is a great lesson that kind of ties in all of the stuff we did in these first 3 units. And then we do a little pre-algebra where we talk about solving one-step equations, which gives them a good jump start into the next class. So for each one of these units, what we have done is we have created guided notes for each of the lessons. So you can see for unit 1, let me change it to go the opposite direction. For unit 1, there's 5 lessons here. Hello? There it goes. The first one just being addition, subtraction, and then addition, subtraction word problems, perimeter, add and subtract integers, some integer word problems, and then coordinate plane. So each one of these is a link to guided notes we've written. And those guided notes, there are examples for the teacher to kind of lead through. There's any relevant vocabulary. There's practice problems for students. And then there's a paper copy of the homework. When we switched to Google Classroom, we also went through and created forms for all of the different homework assignments. So you also have access to all these folders that have got Google Forms for each of the homework assignments. We also have PowerPoints. If we ever go back to teaching in person, you have access to that if you would want. And this would be true for each one of the units in the class. At the very end of the class, there would be a final that goes over all of the different standards, all the different skills that we covered in this class. And if I switch back to that folder with the forms, we've got the final and the unit specific tests in these folders as well. Similar for pre-algebra, where for pre-algebra, each lesson there's guided notes, and then there is a paper copy of the homework, there's a Google form, copy of the homework, and then there's the unit tests and a final as well. For pre-algebra, the material you would be covering, for Unit 1, it's called Operations and Ratios. This is just like a really quick review of a lot of the stuff that if they had us for developmental math, they would have learned in developmental math, or for students starting off in this class, a good review of standards and skills that the rest of these lessons assume they know. So the big ones in Unit 1 are going to be integers. A lot of students start off struggling with how you do math with negative numbers. So there's a lesson on integers, a lesson on fractions and decimals, and then a lesson on ratios and unit rates. Those are the main topics. Oh, and I'm sorry, in order of operations. In Unit 2, this is where we really start getting into pre-algebra. So looking at expressions with variables. So if you're given a real world situation, how you can represent that with an expression using math operations and variables or an equation. And then it gets into solving equations. The end goal of pre-algebra would be that they're starting off algebra able to solve any sort of equation that has one variable in it. So a lot of this unit here is focusing on how you solve equations and proportions, and then using equations to represent real world problems and solving them. And then the last one in Unit 3 gets us started on linear equations. That's something they'll definitely see more of in an algebra class, but this unit here is really introducing them to this idea of looking at a real world situation, being able to represent it not only with an equation, which is what they do back in Unit 2, but also representing it with a table, with a graph, all these different math models we have to represent situations. And then abstracting that a little more and being able to represent just any equation with a table or a graph. So really introducing the idea of linear equations to them. After pre-algebra, when they're moved into algebra, that is where we start using illustrative mathematics curriculum. There are separate videos on how you can access the curriculum. You do have to create an account through Kendall Hunt to have all of the teacher access. But you can see some of the curriculum just from the free end online without having an account. We do not go, let me switch back here. I'm right now in Algebra 1 through Illustrative Mathematics that has all of these different units, and you can see under each unit the main topics that they cover. We do not go through every single lesson from every single unit because this is based off of a 180-day school year. And again, we are on a quarter system. So we do Algebra 1A, which is the first half of algebra in 9 weeks. We do Algebra 1B, also 9 weeks, and that's the second half of algebra. The scope and sequence we're using for algebra is right here in this document, which you should also have access to. For Algebra 1A, which remember is what we call the first half of algebra, so the first 9 weeks of algebra, there are 2 main units that they're looking at. Unit 1 is going to be on one variable statistics. These right here are the lesson numbers that we're pulling from illustrative mathematics. So if you go into Unit 1, there's a lot of different lessons. We are not doing every single one of these lessons. You can see there's a total of 16. We are only doing these number lessons, so about half of them. And then the second unit we're doing in Algebra 1A is on linear equations, inequalities, and then systems. They've started a little bit of linear equations in pre-algebra, but this is really getting into the meat of it all. And so you can see these are all the different lessons we're doing in Unit 2. There's a mid-unit assessment and an end-of-unit assessment. Those are also provided in illustrative mathematics. Everything you would need is here on this website. And someone who is not me has made a video going through how you access all the different awesome resources on this curriculum website. So that would be Algebra 1A, and then Algebra 1B, we are looking at functions in Unit 4. Unit 5, we're looking at exponential functions, and then Unit 6, we are doing quadratic functions. Both of these, notice, are just an introduction to exponential functions and quadratic functions because students will see more of those in Algebra 2, which they complete on Apex, which is the online credit recovery. software we use. So it's an introduction to really get to introduce them to the concepts of exponential functions and quadratic functions. But again, if you're looking at the lessons we don't cover everything on those topics. It's just to kind of expose them so that they've got some prior knowledge when they go into Algebra 2. And again, all of those lessons and those assessments are provided on Illustrative Mathematics. So for example, when you create your account through Kendall Hunt, when you go into a lesson, you'll have access to all of the things you need to teach the lesson. And they've got a lot of information for you to look at to help you teach it. Specifically, you would want to come down here to get any of the resources you might want to teach the lesson, but you can see from this view here the different types of questions they would take you through. And then on the student end, any practice they would be doing at the end of the lesson. And that is the 4 classes and the curriculum for DORS Math. Hopefully you found this video helpful. Thanks and bye.